1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3.
Well, hello and welcome to the Rogue Ones podcast. This is your rogue leader, Leslie Eiler Thompson. I'm so glad you're here for a second episode of this podcast in which I sit down with some rogues and we talk about their experiences that have led them to their current journey, the things that they've learned, the things that they've failed at, the things they've found work. And we examine all of these things as a way to encourage each of us in our own rogue journeys. Before we begin, I would love to start with a wee quotation. And this might be an occurrence for every podcast episode. Not sure. But for this one it is. Came across this recently, and I think particularly for our guest today, this is an interesting consideration. Charles Swindoll, who is a Christian author and pastor, maybe? I don't know. Well, Charles Swindoll says this: because God gave you your makeup and superintended every moment of your past, including all the hardship, pain, and struggles, He wants to use your words in a unique manner. No one else can speak through your vocal cords, and, equally important, no one else has your story. I find that encouraging, that when I'm going through a hardship or a struggle, 10 years down the road, that's building my story. That's building more of who I am and what I'm interested in and what I'm able to do. And my exact vocal cords, even, are a part of that. I think as rogues, it's important for us to always realize that this moment, this present moment that seems so heavy to us, may mean something very, very different, even more grand in the future. So, in light of that conversation about speaking through your vocal cords, that is a perfect segue to our guest for today. He is hysterical, and I apologize in advance for all of the giggling that I will do, because he's just so darn funny. And remember that time I told you that each of these episodes would be about 25 minutes long? Well, I was wrong about this one. It's about 45 minutes, but you're gonna love it. He is a voiceover artist living in Los Angeles, and before I say very much more, I want to hop onto the conversation so he can speak for himself. I just have to hear the retentions man, and we have to tell the story behind the retentions man.
Oh, no.
So we work at Word,
man.
and our jobs at Word, we were essentially on the phone with music pastors and directors wanting to buy music for their choirs. And
also little old church secretaries on behalf of the... Yes.
Mildreds, yes. And so part of our way to make it through all of that was to just mess around, and the voices were very present, and there was a retentions man, and I don't even know, what was the context for retentions man?
It's probably not going to be funny to anybody but us.
Nope, it won't be, but that's fine.
But they, I think, so... It was just my old man. I try to bust him out every once in a while, and
oh my gosh! It's the squeaking on the end of while. You know, there's a squeak.
Well, back in my day, I had to walk uphill to school with my retentions in my back pocket.
My retentions in my back pocket.
Well, so then it was basically, the story was that it was some old man who was like chastising you for not paying attention.
Yeah.
And so you're like, hey, why aren't you paying attention? And so then but then he's like a little senile. So he's like, you need to pay your retention.
Michael Schwalbe, welcome to the Rogue Ones podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here.
I would like to introduce you as a longtime dear friend of mine, and the person that I just giggle the most around, because we just have the most interesting senses of humor.
Yeah, interesting is a charitable way of describing it.
Well, individually, and then together, once we get together, it just
really compounds exponentially.
and certainly sitting next to each other in a cubicle trying to sell choral sheet music, only made that even more
exacerbated.
Oh, that's a great word. So I feel like I just need to ask you the question: you were born, and then what happened? because you were perhaps one of the most interesting people also.
Well, it all started at the turn of the century, 1900, that is. And I was born in the middle of nowhere, Illinois, 1988. I was in the worst part of the state, Decatur, Illinois, and 2.5 hours from the nearest airport. I was blessed to have a family that is still together and just loving and supportive, but none of them really are very creative, and I don't want to be offensive about that, but my brother, my sister, my mom, my dad, nobody's really musical or artistic or my mom kind of is. She used to decorate sweatshirts as a side hobby, and she
did
baked
she
some
bedazzle these sweatshirts?
Kind of. It was she'd do the whatever paint stuff, cloth paint stuff,
totally.
But
they weren't creative in the sense of art or music.
And my dad plays guitar, but he plays church guitar. I don't want to be offensive about that either, but I love you, Dad. But they wanted me to be creative, and so I started taking piano lessons when I was real little, and then switched from that to the drums, and I played drums for 14 years, and but never really did anything vocally, and I outside of my car. And so when I got to college, and throughout high school, I was marching band, pep band, jazz band.
What'd you
drum
play?
line was always drums. And so I thought I wanted to be a rock and metal drummer. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life because I had kind of these disparate talents. I was also had gotten really into sketching and drawing, and I really liked writing. I was really good at prose and poetry, and so. But then I was well, what do I do with all these things? And so then I was well, I guess I'll go to this school for journalism because that has writing, and I don't know. But then so I was double majoring in journalism and anthropology with a sub focus in South American Andean archaeology. I love ancient history. I've always been fascinated by learning about kind of the indigenous tribes and archaeology and that sort of thing. But it wasn't something I was going to do for a career. I just thought the subject matter was fascinating. So it was something that was fun to take while I was miserable in my journalism classes. So I started doing journalism, and right away they're you've got a great voice for broadcast. This is Michael Schwalbe. You're listening to NPR. Good evening.
I love it.
Despite that, they never had me doing any journalism broadcast stuff. Around the time that I was going to start my next semester, I found out that they were going to have you do your next major class was a 20-hour-a-week part-time job at the local newspaper doing sports writing.
Oh, only sports?
So
What is a sports?
I will kill myself. No. So I was no way. I will be miserable. No offense to any listeners that like sports, but I completely don't. I was well, I know what I'm going to do. And through the last 2 years at the University of Missouri, I had, you know how you get to college and everybody's you got to get plugged in. You got to do all the things. And you fill up your schedule way too much.
So I had to say all those things. Yes.
So I was just kind of walking around campus, and I saw a thing for choral tryouts. And so, people say I've got a good singing voice. For me, it was always because I am compelled to do stupid voices. And so I had my good singer voice. And so, that was just an impression I did. It wasn't, and so I got to the tryouts.
Side note, what's fascinating about that is that, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah,
but
go for it.
Actually because I have a degree in vocal performance, and in one of our classical sessions, girl did a song, teacher comes up to her, takes her aside, and whispers something in her ear, and he says, okay, do it again. She did the first verse, and he said, what did I say to her? And we were I don't know, but it was completely different, just insane. And what he said to her was, pretend you are an opera singer, a big fat opera singer. And it's amazing how that...
It colors it, yeah.
It absolutely does. Absolutely.
So I had always had this, perception of opera as being the, resonant, full, oh, tell me. And so then, I could replicate that in my brain. And then, so when I got to the tryout, they were okay, do you have a piece prepared? And I was no. And they're do you have an accompanist? no. I don't know what I expected, but and they were like, can you read music? And I'm like, not really. And they're like, okay, well, sing. I could read rhythm because I was a drummer, but I can't read like key signatures stuff. So then they're like, okay, sing. To their credit, they didn't just kick me out. They're like, sing.
They didn't ask if you were lost. Are you?
Yeah. I just got really into singing, and so I called Mom, and I'm like, Mom, I'm dropping out of college, and I'm gonna move to Nashville, and I'm gonna be a rock star. And she's like, how about we find you a school in Nashville instead?
Aww.
And I was like, okay, that's probably prudent. So I went to Nashville and got involved at Belmont, and couldn't decide if I wanted to do the commercial vocal program or if I wanted to do music business. And so I was just like, God, I feel like you've brought me here. If you want me, I'm going to try out for vocal, and if you want me to do business, make me fail my audition. And so I auditioned, and I bombed it, and I went and did music business without a second thought.
What do you mean you bombed it? Like, what did that?
Just, I don't know, bad pieces. I got really super nervous. My pitch was all wonky. I just didn't sing well. My prepared CD thing that I was going to be like my backing tracks just didn't work on their CD player. So I had to sing with an accompanist that I'd never met, who was amazing. His name was Brooks.
Yep, Brooks played for my audition too.
So I didn't do well, and without a second thought, went to music business, and it was totally the right choice.
And the way that our paths crossed is you had a metal band.
I did. I guess.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say.
We're still sort of writing. We haven't played a show in a while, but still making music.
Invicta, and my now husband, then boyfriend, was wrangled into being guitar player number 2.
Yes. Next
to DJ.
Mm-hmm. And then I think one of the first times that the three of us hung out was on that church retreat.
Wait.
That was where you guys...
Mike wasn't even in the band.
No.
We weren't even dating.
Yeah.
Yes, right. It was Belmont Heights. There was a church down the road from Belmont called Belmont Heights, and we all went there.
So, but yeah, we went on that church retreat, and that's how we met. And it's another lifetime.
It is. How did Mike get wrangled into the... Was it from you meeting him there? Or
I think it was... I think DJ and him were both guitar majors at the time. Yeah. So I think DJ just kind of met him. And I was like, oh, yeah, I know him from church. He's a good dude. And so we had him try out. Gotcha. Good times. And so I did the Belmont thing. Another kind of fortuitous God moment got me roped into working at Word Music. And for those that are listening who don't know, Word is the Christian division of Warner Music, and then that was when you ended up coming to Word as well, maybe another year later. And through then kind of happenstance, I wound up getting to do some projects with them doing voice stuff that made me realize that, like, if I'm good enough for these artists, I'm good enough for myself. So I decided that I would just sell myself instead of selling music, and it was off to the races. It
was probably like a year ago this month that we had coffee, because I had just started my self-employment journey, and I was kind of thinking along the lines of, a few people had said to me, you should consider doing voiceover work. And I was like, I need to take Schwalbe to coffee and just pick his brain. And one of the most interesting things you said was that you didn't see it as a trial run. You were like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And that was so profound to me. Can you speak a little bit to that? Like,
yeah, and what with the Rogue Ones kind of being about things that have enabled you to make these leaps of faith. You know, I had my family's support, and even though they thought I was kind of insane, they were like, well, if you think you can do it, we got your back, kind of. So I saved up money for a number of months. Helped enormously by the fact that my grandparents paid for my college education, which many people don't have that luxury. But even if they didn't, I don't think it would have stopped me or anything, because money was never like. I mean, obviously money is important, and I was very keenly aware of just how much money I was going to be losing by leaving my job. And I mean, I guess like part of me thought it could, and I was like, well, I guess if it ends up not working out, I'll go into real estate.
Well, and it's just an interesting side note that sometimes what we do full time, I have a good friend who technically nannies full time, but that is not how she introduces herself to people, and she likes doing it, fine. Yeah. But just because we're doing something full time doesn't mean, that is what we are pursuing.
One of my favorite proverbs, I guess, in that situation is, if you are what you do, if you can't, you aren't.
I got to think about that. If you are what you do, you can't. Yeah.
So basically saying that, you can't have your career tied to your identity, or you can't be like, this is how I introduce myself, is like, this is what I am, is my job, because then if you lose that job, you'll lose yourself. Yes. So while I don't introduce myself, I guess I do. If people are like, so what do you do? Then I'll say I'm a voice actor. But even when I left Word to get into this, and it was like, well, if it doesn't work out, I'll do real estate. I'll make something work out. But I was just I never even researched real estate. I was just supremely convinced that this is what God wanted me to do. And in hindsight, I was right. But I didn't have a plan B. My plan B was making plan A work. So family paying my college tuition was really helpful, incredibly helpful.
Which is important for us to acknowledge the times in our life when people have done things for us that we just could not possibly do on our own.
Yeah. And that while, even if I was... Like I was saying, was that even if they hadn't done that, though, I don't think that it would have stopped me, because I left a full-time salaried job with benefits. I had all my health care covered. They had a great health care.
I remember it.
Yeah. Oh, the days.
The days.
I saved up money. And then I also another very lucky situation that helped me make it possible was that at the height of the housing slump, I had managed to buy a condo. And so I started renting out half my condo to help with just some extra cash flow. And that also just helped a lot. And I knew that my family would have my back, even though my grandfather in particular had several discussions with me that was like, are you sure this is... I was like, no, you got to trust me, man. It's going to work.
One of the interesting things my dad said, even when I switched jobs from working with Word and then this Getty Music, which is a couple that write hymns. And he said something so profound to me, even though it wasn't very profound. It was a silly question. He's not a musician. He just said to me, so if they decide to stop singing, do you lose your job? And I just kind of had this moment where I was like, yeah, kind of. And that's what happens when you are working in someone else's dream, they stop their dream and your job is done. Yeah.
Well, and it's fairly, it's fairly the same for what I'm doing now, that people see me as successful and I'm booking work, but really every time the current job ends, I'm in a constant state of unemployment. I mean, because
the gig always ends.
Yeah, the gig always ends. I don't have any long-term gigs going on right now.
Are there any opportunities that are ongoing for voice actors?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've got a friend of mine who's got a gig with Pandora, where they'll just send him Pandora spots for the radio, and he makes 6 figures off that one client. And they just send him a couple every single day. If you're the brand, you're the voice of Ford, or if you're a network promo guy, they call that the golden handcuffs, because you gotta be there on the microphone.
That's good. The golden handcuffs.
Yeah, because you can't really have a life. I was inviting a friend of mine out to go do something. He's like, well, we'll have to do it over in my neck of the woods, because I got to be back at such and such time to do my promo for the day.
Do you find in your line of work and in your expertise that you should and could diversify? Meaning, in my marketing world, it's good to have a few retainer clients, but then it's good to have different projects, so that if one goes away, I still have everything else? Like, is that still?
Oh yeah. That was my second year doing this. I got lucky and I got 2 different clients that each paid low 5 figures. And so between those 2, they were more than half my income for that year. And then at the same time in the same month, both of them stopped. So my income went down like 60%, and I was making like nothing for several months, pretty much. I, under $1,000 a month, and it was like, oh my God, what am I doing?
Yeah.
This is really. So it took a while to get the ball rolling again, because I had kind of gotten comfortable with each of them were sending me a couple things a week, and I did 51 videos for one person and 70 for the other. So like it was a lot of work, and but it can also be difficult in that situation where you've got this job that's really good, and so then you think, oh, this is the new normal. This is like I've reached this level of success. I've got this client that's giving me all this work. So even if they stop, this is what I'm accustomed to now. And so like if they stop and then you suddenly realize that like, oh, actually I was wrong. Like that was an outlier. That's not the new normal. These kind of clients are really hard to get. And so you can kind of get yourself false expectations or almost a false sense of security that you think I've reached a level where I can attract clients like this, and it's not always the case. You have to try really hard to find those kind of people, or just hope, you pray to God that they come your way. And that's kind of the dilemma that I had when I was in Nashville, is that I was comfortable. I was making a livable income, and had some cool jobs, and but then I was talking, when I was out in LA for a trip, I was talking with a friend of mine who's an amazing composer and producer, and he wound up doing a production on I think This Is Me for The Greatest Showman, and we were out to lunch, and he started asking me, so man, why aren't you out here in LA yet? And I was like, well, I love Nashville. And he's like, you got a lot of family there? I'm like, well, no, they're actually all out. They're in Phoenix now. And so I'd be much closer out here. He's like, you got like a girlfriend or wife out there? And at the time I did not. And he's like, do you have like a pet that like you wouldn't be able to bring out with you? And no, I don't have any pets at all. He's like, do you have like a lot of Nashville clients that you have to be in the city for? I'm like, no, my clients are pretty much all around the world. I don't really have that many in Nashville. He's like,
why are you
here? And so I was like, well, when I put it like that,
right, exactly. When I put it like that,
and it really
That's
started
good.
making me think that like, am I in Nashville because I think it's what's going to be best for me long term, or am I here because of complacency, And since I feel like I got into this business through God's calling, it was like, do I want to like limit myself based on my own comfort level, or do I want to try to step out in faith that he's calling me to like see where it's going to go? Like I would hate to have stayed in Nashville for 20 years and then ended up that like going, well, what if I had gone to LA? You know? So, and then just when I booked a really great video game out in LA. And so I flew out there for the session. And while I was there, I was like, you know what? I'm going to reach out to several of these big agents. And I had just gotten a bunch of new demo reels made. So I felt really solid about where I was at and representing myself. And so, all 3 of them, 3 of the 4 that I reached out to wanted to meet with me. And then 2 of them wanted me to read for them. And so then,
is that the level then? Is it meeting first and then reading and then they book you, or how does?
Yeah, usually for like, and these are, it's different. There's several different tiers of talent agents, and so people would be like, oh yeah, I've got like 3 agents or something, and what they'll usually mean is they have 3 regional agents. And if you're at like what they call the bi-coastal agencies or the major national agencies, that's when it's like, it's a lot more serious. So then you have to like email them usually with at least one really great referral to get them to pay attention to you and listen to you. And then they'll listen to your stuff. And then if you're like, hey, I would love to sit down and meet with you, cool. And then if they're interested in potentially representing you, then they'll say, they'll have you read for them too. And that's kind of your audition for them.
So you moved out to LA. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I've been here about 2 months now.
Switching gears to like your background, going back to that.
Yeah.
I remember you kind of telling me about the voiceover thing and how looking back, you realized it actually, you talked about impersonating an opera singer, but there were several moments in your life where you like can point to that you were like, no, this idea of making my voice sound like somebody else happened a lot growing up. Yeah,
well, because people will ask me, because it just, a lot of people that are getting into the business are trying to like learn acting techniques and developing like a backstory for their characters. And then for me, it's just always been very second nature. It's very easy for me to just kind of be this person instinctively. And so then people be like, well, how did you develop that sense? Is it, did you act a lot in school? And it's really no. Did you, I wasn't a performer. I was a drummer, so I guess I was a performer, but I wasn't like a singer on stage, like being other people in musical theater or anything. So, and so I was just kind of trying to think like, well, where would I have exercised this acting muscle? And I think I'm convinced now that it was because of my little brother and I, because we would spend thousands of hours in the woods around our Illinois home. We lived next to an abandoned Girl Scout camp. It was supremely creepy. It looked like something out of a Saw movie. It was almost like if anybody has played like Dungeons and Dragons, because my brother was like kind of the editor and the creator, and then I would obviously help, but then we would just play out these long storylines that we would both make up, and both of us would be half the characters, and we would do the voices, and we would play. I mean, and some of these stories we would play through for years.
Really?
Yeah, years of us inventing the next plot point and like.
But see, that's why I wanted to get into Dungeons and Dragons, because there is this element of building a story, and it seems as though it's mostly just storytelling, and you're making it all up, and it's just pure imagination and story, but yet you kind of have to know what makes a good story in order for it to be interesting.
Yeah, and so through doing that, and I guess you could just say it was role playing, kind of, that we would just, for thousands of hours, like Mom would have to repeatedly tell us to like come back inside or like go to bed, because we would just stay up for hours playing out because we couldn't wait to see what would happen next, in our story. And so then now that I'm older, it's like I can just kind of lapse into that mindset again of like, now I am no longer Michael Schwalbe. I am this aged king who's watching his like city crumble around him, but he's too. His hubris doesn't allow him to like admit his errors or something. It's
almost like in a moment you have done backstory research just in an instant.
Well, and it's making the decisions, because like a lot of people have, analysis paralysis, where they're like, what texture should I put on his voice, and like what? It's the difference between acting and being.
Yeah. Ooh. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I just try to be that person rather than like impersonating what I think they would sound like. It's more of like, okay, well, if these were the events that had led me up to this point in my life, how would I sound if I was in that situation? So
now just switching to general overall, being a rogue, doing your own thing. I've said it at the beginning, you are perhaps one of the most interesting people. Sometimes you don't have a filter, and I think you know that.
Yeah, my goal is for nobody to ever leave a conversation with Michael Schwalbe going, I wonder what Michael really thought.
I think you are meeting your goals. Well, and that's what I appreciate about you is that there is no one else on the planet.
What you see is what you get.
What you see is what you get. Actually, the guy that I worked for, you guys are a lot alike. And you have no choice with people like you. You have absolutely no choice but to be honest with them, because you will not continue a relationship with them unless you are being honest. So there's that. You're unashamed to like what you like. You at one point have been a metal screamer, and then you went to screaming on Wendy's commercials, which I love.
I know, right? Wasn't
Screaming
that great?
monkey. I'll go ahead and
it's funny to me. It's funny to me just how much that metal side of me has contributed to character work and commercial work and all that stuff.
Really? Because it's using the fullness of your
and like just the techniques that I managed to figure out, and the methods that I was doing to be able to make those kind of extreme vocals sustainable and consistent. Then when you are brought in to voice something like a screaming Wendy's monkey,
which I will put the link to that commercial in this description.
Okay. You can, when I got to that session, I had to do it for an hour and a half. So I auditioned for this through one of my regional agents. It was Tag, and they said in the specs they wanted this monkey character for Wendy's union TV and radio campaign. They wanted a loud talker, and I was like, I can talk loud. So I said, so my audition was like, "Hey, Greg, hey, the new Wendy's double stack," and like just kind of that sort of voice. And so they booked me on that, and so I go to the session, and they were thinking of flying me out to LA for it, but we wound up doing it in Nashville, just remotely. And but my friend Andy, just a dear friend and a strong Christian, he ended up, and it's funny, we always joke that we always get cast together. He wound up doing the announcer.
Oh,
for
cool.
it. So I get to the session, and they're like, "All right, just let's run through once like you did in your auditions." So I'm like, "Hey, Greg," and so then they're like, "Yeah, that was good. Can you do one where you're like kind of just yelling it?" And so I was like, "Hey, Greg, Wendy's double stack," and then they're like, "Yeah, let's just for fun, let's just try one where you're just screaming at the top of your lungs." And that was when I went, "Hey, Greg!"
And that was it.
And then they're like, "Yeah, that's what we want."
Oh my god!
And so for an hour and a half, I went through, and it was just doing all the like, "The new from Wendy's double stack," like just at the top of my lungs. And
but I remember one time you were trying to give me a metal screaming lesson because you know, my boyfriend at the time was in this metal band, and I was around all these metal guys, which was so fun. And there is a side of me that's really into that kind of music. And as a vocalist, you know, I know that there is a good way to do it and there's a healthy way to do it. And so we were having a lesson, and you were trying to teach me about these secondary vocal cords.
Yeah.
And
your
quite got it.
Your false chords and the vestibular folds. I remember you kind of got it, and then you're like, "Oh, it feels like I'm toothbrushing the inside of my throat."
But that's not something that, like, because with the singing voice, it's like I can control it in my mouth. That's what you've just done.
It's muscle control.
Yeah, it's less control. I almost felt like when in that lesson, I wasn't controlling my voice very much at all, you know?
It's fun, like that. One of the other things I wanted to teach myself was how to sing with grit, because the reason that metal technique isn't harmful is because it doesn't use your vocal cords. It's it's non-melodic. Your vocal cords are just not being engaged. Then I wanted to figure out how to do like raspy, gritty singing, you know, honesty, right, like that kind of, hey. So I then found out, well, wait, if I'm teaching myself how to do these mixed voice, mix layer, like raspiness, or I could subtract that, like I could make those into character voices. So then I got did maybe one of my favorite characters I've ever done, and I wish I could do more of him, but the game's done. Was a game called Cosmic Chef,
Cool.
And they wanted the announcer. It's this goofy. It's supposed to be like a reality TV show cooking competition in space. So they were like, well, we want like maybe like a monster truck, kind of just want a lot of excitement for this cooking competition. So I did a little of that, and they're like, yeah, it's all right. And then I was like, I've got an idea. Yeah. And so I married kind of that like morning radio DJ, like super over the top excitement, like, welcome to the morning show with such and such, like that kind of vibe, but then with like monster truck grittiness to get this just awesome voice. I don't even know what to call it, but like it basically sounds like he'd say like, and now for the Gleep Glorp Nebula, it's like, it's such and such making the following dish. And so like just Cosmic Chef.
Oh my gosh, like, that's incredible.
And it was great. It was so much fun. And so, but because I could sing like the, yay, because I could do that, then it was easy to kind of get these really high sing-songy, all right, everybody, so come on to the show. And there wasn't like a crazy like break or vocal something in there. People like playing sports or something, like the voice is my sport. I just like seeing like what I can get away with and what I can like what techniques you can figure out, and whether it's metal or Tuvan throat singing or character goofiness is just so much fun.
So you are unashamed in the things that you love, and you're unashamed in who you are, which is one of the most amazing things. Do you ever feel insecure or afraid? I think a lot of time, I mean, I know I do. I'll be the first to say I do. But what does that look like for you? How do you push through it?
Yeah, it happens a lot. And you know, it's good now that like, so 7 or 8 months ago, I met this just wonderful girl named Courtney, and she's just really completed me, and we're gonna get married, but don't tell her that yet.
Okay. I'm going to pop in here just for a moment to let you know that a few weeks after we talked in this interview, Michael did propose to Courtney. They are officially engaged. So I left this in the podcast because I just thought it was so cute. And now we'll carry on.
Looks like that I was more or less single for almost a decade. I mean, I dated a few different people, but like I don't need a relationship to feel whole necessarily, so I wasn't going to like engage in one that I knew wouldn't go anywhere just to have it. So, but you know, after, I don't know, however many years, I just like 8 or 9 years, you do start feeling insecure that like, why is this not working out? And so you still trust that like God's timing is going to be sufficient for you, but it's never really very easy to trust in that. I have been getting fairly insecure. I'll just be honest. My agency bookings are down. I've still been working. I had an awesome video game project in December, so I'm not starving by any means. But, you know, when you move out here and you think, like, I'm going to hit the city by storm and I'm going to, you know, and then maybe it takes a little longer to get that ball rolling than you thought it would, can not necessarily be discouraging, but just a little bit like, all right.
Yep.
I guess I'll just deal with it. Is there something I'm doing wrong? And so for me, that usually, rather than manifest itself as like, oh, I'm terrible at this, or I made a mistake. It's more of like, okay, well, here's the problem. What can I do to fix it? Usually if something like that happens, my assumption is, well, maybe I've gotten too late, or not lazy, but like just
there's
too
always
practiced.
more work to be done.
I got too comfortable in a certain type of read, and maybe that's not what people are looking for anymore.
Kind of have to bust it out.
Yeah, just like get myself out of like, okay, this is the samey thing that I'm reading for everything. Let's knock that out and maybe listen to what other people are doing and go back to basics.
And you talked about how January was really slow. What do you do in slow months? What are the things that you do to keep things rolling?
It used to be what I would do is I would just try to like start emailing more people again, or like look for conferences or conventions and stuff. Now it's more of like, since I'm wanting to rely more, I've got like 7 agencies. Now that it's like, okay, I need to do less hustling. I need to work more on getting my reads up for these jobs where they need to be. So that's why when it slowed down for me this month, that was when I started like trying to go to more workout sessions, book coaching sessions to get my, because the opportunities are there. It's no longer, it's not really anymore that I have to like rustle up the opportunities. You know, the days of like hoping that you get one audition are long gone. I mean, I did 12 yesterday.
Do you find that the holiday season just completely knocks everything off of its feet for you too?
Oh yeah. It's December is very slow for everybody. January takes a little while to get back moving as well, as what I've heard from a number of people. But it's fickle because like, I don't know, maybe the first or the second year, like December and January were like some of my best months of that year.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. But of course that was like near around when I had met those couple really big, awesome clients. So
I think that's across the board for everybody. Every self-employed person, it's just like, there's no everything just, except for people who are like in high demand for doing Christmas parties.
Right.
You know, like entertainers who are like, cocktail singers or whatever. Yeah, but everybody else is like, nope. Or financial people. There was somebody, I'm in a networking group with a woman who's a financial planner, and all of her clients who, they specialize in wealth that's a little higher than what I will ever see. But she, the last week of December, everybody's trying to figure out where to give their money for tax purposes.
Yep.
So, well, Schwalbe, thank you. I appreciate you taking time to talk to me and to our listening audience out there.
Yes, all 5,000 million of them. Or
just one, and it's both of our moms. So there you have it. There is Michael Schwalbe, voiceover actor, living in Los Angeles. His website is in the description of this podcast. Please do check it out. Show him some love. Play his video games. The Wendy's commercial is also in the description. You should check that out. You'll also find a link to rogueonespodcast.com, which is the website for all things about this podcast, including the super awesome I Am a Rogue t-shirt. I love it. All my podcast guests get one, and you can get one for yourself. They're $15. Head on over to rogueonespodcast.com. I can't wait for you to hear our next guest and all the things we're going to learn from them. So take care of yourself, and we'll talk again soon.